My mother came to my front door on a Saturday morning with a folder of receipts. I had not seen her in 11 years. She was wearing a coat I recognized from when I was in college, the cream wool one she had bought herself in Boston the year my dad got promoted. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. She was standing on my porch with her hand on the railing, the way you stand when you have been planning a conversation for a long time, and you have finally arrived at the porch where you are going to have it. She looked at me. She did not say hello. She held up the folder. She said, "We deserve our share now." I want you to understand. The share she was talking about was a number my mother had only learned about 3 weeks earlier, when she had read a piece in a business newspaper that had mentioned my husband by name and had quoted the sale price of his company. The sale price had been $91 million. My husband had been one of 3 founders. His share had been roughly 40%. The article had not mentioned his wife. The article had not mentioned that his wife had been cut off by her own family 11 years earlier for marrying him. The article had been a small piece in the technology section that most people had not read. My mother had read it. My mother, I would learn later, had a Google alert set up on his name that had been in place for almost a decade. She had set it up 2 years after she had told me, on a phone call I would never forget, that I was no longer welcome in the family I had grown up in. She had set it up in case anything ever happened that would make him worth knowing. She had been waiting 11 years for the alert to go off. The morning the article was published, I would learn later, she had screenshotted it and forwarded it to my father, my older sister, my younger brother, and 3 of her closest friends, with a single sentence in the body of the email. The sentence had been, "I told you, we just had to be patient." I had not known about the alert when I opened my front door that Saturday. I had only known that my mother was standing on my porch, 11 years after the phone call, holding a folder, and asking me for a share of money that had nothing to do with her. What I handed her, 10 minutes later, is the part of this story that I want to tell you about. But first I want to tell you about my husband, and about the country my mother had spent my whole childhood telling me she would never set foot in, and about the small slip of paper I had been keeping in the bottom drawer of my desk for almost 2 years, waiting for a day I had not been entirely sure was coming. Before I do that, hit subscribe, and tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me about a moment your family told you, in language that did not leave room for misunderstanding, that the person you had chosen to love was not allowed to be loved by them. Tell me how old you were. Tell me what they said. Tell me what you did with what they said. I read every single comment. Now let me take you back to the year I was 23. My name is Mehernisa Aslam Wakikagile. I am 35 years old. I am an associate professor of architecture at a university in Toronto. I have been married for 12 years to a man named Yusuf Mwakikagile, who is a software engineer originally from Tanzania, who emigrated to Canada at 19, and who I met when we were both graduate students. He is the person I love most in this world. He is also, according to my mother, the reason my family stopped speaking to me when I was 24. I want to tell you about Yusuf because the rest of this story does not work if you think this was just about money or pride. He was a tall, careful, quietly funny man who had built a small startup with 2 college friends in his late 20s, while finishing his PhD, while teaching adjunct courses to pay his rent, and while learning, from me, how to make my mother's biryani recipe, which I had carried into my marriage as if it were a piece of inherited furniture. He had liked the biryani. He had asked me to teach him how to make it within the first 6 months we were dating. He had spent 11 years cooking it for me, almost every Sunday, in the small apartment we had shared in Toronto, and then in the small house we had bought in our late 20s, while my mother had been refusing to take my phone calls. The biryani is part of why I am telling you this. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from realizing that the man you have married has been more careful with the recipes of your culture than the family that raised you ever was. My mother had never made me biryani after I turned 20. She had been too busy. My older sister had not learned to cook it. My younger brother had certainly not. By the time I was in graduate school, the only person on earth who was making me my mother's biryani, on a regular Sunday schedule, in the way she had once made it before her own mother died, was a man my family had decided was too foreign to be allowed to be part of us. I want to tell you about my family. I want to be honest about who they are, because honesty is the only way to make sense of what I did with that envelope. My family is Pakistani. My grandparents on both sides emigrated to the United States in the late 1960s, as part of a wave of skilled professionals who came over after the Immigration Act of 1965 had opened up new visa categories. My father is a cardiologist. My mother is a retired pharmacist. They raised me and my 2 siblings in a comfortable suburb of Boston. My older sister Faiza is a corporate lawyer. My younger brother Adnan runs a private equity fund. We all went to Ivy League universities. We all married people my parents approved of, except for me. I want to tell you what specifically my parents had wanted for me. They had wanted me to marry a Pakistani man, ideally one whose family they had known socially for at least 2 generations. There had been 3 or 4 candidates they had been quietly cultivating since I had been in high school. By the time I had been in graduate school, my mother had been mentioning these candidates to me on every phone call. By the time I had been 23, the mentioning had become more pointed. By the time I had been 24, my mother had been asking me, in the voice she used when she was trying to sound concerned and not pushy, when I was going to come home and meet a few people she had been thinking I should meet. I had been dating Yusuf for 2 years by the time I was 24. I had not told my parents. I had been afraid. I had known the conversation was going to be a hard one. I had been putting it off. The conversation finally happened on a Sunday in March, when Yusuf had proposed to me on a small bridge in a park in Toronto, and I had said yes, and I had decided I was going to call my mother that evening to tell her. I called her at 7 in the evening. I told her I had something important to share. I told her I had been seeing somebody for 2 years. I told her his name. I told her his nationality. I told her his religion. He is also Muslim. I want you to know that. The interfaith part was not what made my parents reject him. He had been Muslim. He had been observant. He had been, by every metric of religious practice, more disciplined than my own family, who had become, over the years in America, the kind of family that prayed at Eid and sometimes on Fridays and not really at any other time. The thing that had made my parents reject him had been his nationality and his ethnicity, and the fact that his family was not from a community my parents had ever socialized with. His family was Tanzanian. They had been in Tanzania for generations. His grandfather had been a respected primary school teacher in a small town outside Dar es Salaam. His mother had been a pharmacist like mine. His father had been an accountant. He had emigrated to Canada at 19 on a scholarship, and had built his life there, and had become, by his late 20s, the man I had decided I was going to marry. I told my mother all of this on the phone. There was a long pause after I finished. Then my mother told me, in the voice she had been using for difficult conversations my whole childhood, that she was going to have to call me back. She did not call me back that night. She called me back 2 days later. By the time she called me back, my father, my older sister Faiza, and my younger brother Adnan had all been informed. They had had a family meeting without me. They had agreed on what my mother was going to say. My mother said very calmly that the family had decided that they were not going to be able to support this marriage. She said the family had decided that I was going to have to choose. She said that if I chose to marry Yusuf, I should not expect to remain in contact with them. She said this would be hard for everybody, but that the family had to think about its own integrity. She said the word integrity twice. She said that my children, if I had children with Yusuf, would not be welcomed into the family. She said this in a way that suggested she had been practicing the sentence for 2 days. I want to tell you what I felt while she was speaking. I felt a particular kind of cold. It was the cold that comes when somebody you have loved your entire life is delivering a sentence they have prepared, and you can hear the preparation in the way they are saying it. They are not improvising. They have agreed in advance with other people on the phrasing. The phrasing has been workshopped. You are not in the workshop. You are the recipient of the language they have decided is the language they are going to use on you. The cold is the cold of being on the receiving end of language you have not been allowed to participate in. I told my mother I was getting married. I told her I loved her. I told her I hoped she would change her mind. I told her I would let her decide what to do next. I hung up the phone. That was 11 years ago. I want to tell you what those 11 years were like, because the 11 years are the engine of why I had the envelope ready when she came to my front door. The first year was the worst. I had a wedding without my parents. My older sister did not come. My younger brother did not come. None of my aunts came. None of my cousins came. The wedding was small. It was held at Yusuf's parents' house in Mississauga, with about 40 people, most of them his family and our friends from graduate school. My best friend Saba, who was also Pakistani-American, who had grown up in our community in Boston, who had been disowned by her own family 2 years earlier for marrying a Black American man, came. She and I held each other in the parking lot before the ceremony for almost 10 minutes. We did not say much. We just held each other. We had been preparing for this for years without knowing it. Yusuf's mother, a woman named Zawadi, who had emigrated from Tanzania in her 30s and who had built her own pharmacy career in Canada, was the one who had walked me through the ceremony. She had taken on the role my own mother would have had at a Pakistani wedding. She had been gentle with me. She had told me, quietly, in a small back hallway of the house before I had walked into the main room, that she knew what it had cost me to arrive at that wedding without my own mother, and that she was sorry, and that she would try, in the years ahead, to be a kind of mother to me where she could be. She had been, for the 11 years since, exactly that. She had become my mother in the small daily ways my own mother had stopped being. She had taught me to cook 3 Tanzanian dishes I had not known how to cook. She had been there when I had had 2 pregnancy losses in our late 20s. She had been there when I had finally had my daughter Amani 3 years ago, and my son Idris 14 months ago. I want to tell you about Amani and Idris, because they are the part of this story that broke me hardest. My mother had said, on the phone call 11 years earlier, that my children would not be welcome in the family. I had not believed her at first. I had thought that, when grandchildren came, the situation would soften. I had thought my mother was speaking out of pride and that she would change her mind when she had seen photographs of a baby with her own features in it. She had not changed her mind. Amani had been born 3 years ago. I had texted my mother a photograph the day after the birth. The photograph had not been answered. I had texted her again on Amani's first birthday. She had not answered. I had stopped texting her by Amani's second birthday. Idris had been born last year. I had not told my mother. There had been no point. The grandmother my children would have had on my side of the family had decided, 11 years earlier, to be a stranger to them. She had stuck to the decision with a discipline that almost impressed me by the time I had stopped expecting anything else. Yusuf's startup had been in the news several times over the 11 years. The company had grown slowly. They had built a software product for hospital administration, which was not glamorous, which had not been in any consumer headlines, and which had been quietly profitable for years. 2 years ago, a larger company had begun negotiations to acquire them. The negotiations had taken almost 18 months. The sale had finally closed 3 weeks before my mother showed up on my porch. The sale price had been $91 million. Yusuf's share, after all the legal and tax structures had been settled, was approximately $28 million. We had not changed our lives yet. We had been talking about what to do. We had been thinking about a small foundation. We had been thinking about how to do right by his co-founders, who had also done well but who had different family situations than we did. We had been thinking about Tanzania, which is a place I want to tell you about now, because the country is the seed of what was in the envelope. Yusuf and I had been going to Tanzania every year for the 11 years of our marriage. We had been going to a small town outside Dar es Salaam, where his grandfather Babu Hamis had lived in a small house his entire life, and where Yusuf's extended family still gathered for Eid each year. Babu Hamis had been the patriarch of Yusuf's family. He had been a primary school teacher for 46 years. He had taught generations of children in his town to read in both Swahili and English. He had loved me from the moment Yusuf had brought me to meet him. Babu Hamis had died 2 years ago. I had flown to Tanzania for the funeral. I had cried at his graveside more than I had cried at any other funeral, including my own grandmother's, who had died when I was 15. Babu Hamis had been the closest thing I had had to a grandfather since my own had died, and he had taken me in his quiet, generous way, the way Yusuf's mother had taken me in 11 years earlier in a small back hallway of a house in Mississauga. After Babu Hamis had died, Yusuf and I had decided we would establish a small scholarship in his name at the primary school where he had taught. The scholarship would send local children to secondary school in Dar es Salaam, with full board, for as long as Yusuf and I could fund it. We had set it up about a year ago. The first cohort of scholars had started classes about 6 months later. Last summer, after the scholarship had been running for a few months, the school had invited Yusuf and me to come back and meet the students. We had gone. The students had been small and serious and uniformly excited. The headmistress, a woman named Mwajuma Kaleo, had asked us if we wanted to take a class photograph with the students. We had. The photograph had ended up on the wall of my home office. It had also ended up on a wall in the school, with a small plaque underneath it that named both Yusuf and me as the scholarship's founders, and that included a sentence about Babu Hamis. I want to tell you what I had been doing for the last 2 years, in addition to being a professor and a wife and a mother of 2 small children. I had been quietly buying plane tickets. Specifically, I had been buying one-way tickets to Dar es Salaam, in different names, for different family members on my own side, in what had been, at first, almost a private joke I had been keeping to myself. I had bought a ticket for my mother first. I had bought it about 2 years ago after Babu Hamis had died, when I had been sitting in the airport in Tanzania waiting for my flight home and had been remembering with a particular sharpness The sentence my mother had said many times during my childhood. The sentence had been, "I would never set foot in a country like that." She had said this about Tanzania specifically once, when I had been about 14, when there had been a news story about Tanzania on television. She had also said it about Kenya. She had said it about Ghana. She had said it about most countries on the African continent. She had said it casually, the way some women say they would never wear a particular color. She had said it without apparently noticing that she was saying it. She had said it within earshot of me and of my siblings, and she had passed the sentiment along to all three of us, and only one of us had ended up examining the sentiment when we became adults, and that one of us was the one she had eventually disowned. I had bought the ticket for her in the airport in Dar es Salaam on my phone, on a small online travel site in a kind of half game I was playing with myself. The ticket had been for an arbitrary date 6 months in the future. I had paid for it with a credit card. I had set it up so that the booking confirmation went to a separate email address I had created, which she did not know about. The ticket had been refundable. I had refunded it 3 days later. Then, 6 months after that, I had bought another one. Same destination, different date, different airline. I had refunded that one too. I had bought ticket after ticket every 6 months for 2 years, refunding each one before the date came due, because I had not been ready to do whatever the doing of the ticket was eventually going to mean. I had been holding the gesture in my hand, in a sense, without yet using it. I had been waiting to see if I was ever going to use it. I had not been entirely sure I was. When my mother had walked up to my porch that Saturday morning with the folder of receipts and had asked me for our share, I had finally been ready. I had walked her into my front hallway. I had not invited her into the living room, where Yusuf had been with the children. I had asked her to wait for a moment. I had gone into my home office and had pulled an envelope out of the bottom drawer of my desk. The envelope had been there for about 10 days. I had bought a ticket the morning after I had read the same business newspaper article she had read, 3 weeks earlier, when I had realized that the alert she would have set up on Yusuf was about to go off, and that she was probably going to come find me. I had been ready when she rang the doorbell. I came back to the front hallway with the envelope. My mother was still standing there with her folder of receipts. She had been watching the small framed photograph on my hallway wall. The photograph was of Babu Hamis, taken at his 80th birthday party, holding a small hand mirror that one of his great-grandchildren had given him as a gift. The photograph was a beautiful one. I had taken it myself. She looked at me when I came back. She held up the folder. She said, "Meru, we need to talk about this seriously. Your father and I have been quiet for a long time. We have been giving you space. But the family has been carrying real costs over the last 11 years. Costs we have not asked you to think about. We are going to need to get on the same page about what is fair going forward." I want to tell you what I felt while she was talking. I did not feel rage. I want to be honest about that. I had felt rage about my mother for many years, and the rage had slowly cooled, by the time I had been 30, into a kind of clear, flat space inside me. The space was not bitter. It was simply final. My mother had become, in the 11 years since the phone call, a person I no longer expected anything from. The lack of expectation had been a relief, eventually. The lack of expectation had also been the thing that had finally allowed me to laugh, very quietly, when she said the words, "What is fair?" I laughed in my front hallway. Not a loud laugh, a small one. The kind of laugh you make when somebody has said something so far outside the bounds of what you had been ready to hear that the only thing your face can do is smile slightly. I said, "Mom, I am going to give you something." She brightened. I want you to know that. She actually brightened. The folder of receipts came down to her side. She had assumed in that moment that I was about to write her a check. I handed her the envelope. She opened it. She unfolded the paper inside. She read it. Her face went through 3 stages. The first was confusion. The second was something I had never seen on her face before, which was a kind of bewildered embarrassment. The third was anger. She looked up at me. She said, "Meru, what is this?" "Mom," I said, "it is a one-way ticket to Dar es Salaam. The flight is in 3 weeks. The ticket is in your name. The booking is paid for. The seat is in business class. There is also a small itinerary attached. The itinerary has the name of a primary school in a town outside Dar es Salaam. The school is the school where my husband's grandfather taught for 46 years. The school is also the school where Yusuf and I run a scholarship program. The students are 11 years old. There are 16 of them in the first cohort. They have asked to meet me. I have not been back since the program started. I have decided that I am going to take you with me when I go." My mother was holding the ticket as if she had been handed a thing she did not know how to hold. I said, "Mom, you spent my whole childhood telling me you would never set foot in a country like Tanzania. You said it in front of me. You said it in front of my brother and my sister. You said it the way some people say small, comfortable things they have not actually examined. I want to give you the chance to examine it now. I am not going to write you a check. I am not going to give you a share of money my husband earned on the basis of a marriage you decided was not allowed. I am not going to fund the assumptions you spent my childhood building. I am going to give you, instead, an opportunity to spend 2 weeks in the country my husband's grandfather lived in, who was the man who treated me more kindly in 11 years than you treated me in 23. You can get on the plane, or you cannot get on the plane. The ticket is paid for. The choice is yours." She looked at me for a long time. She did not say anything for almost a minute. Then she said, "I know, Mom," I said. "I am giving it to you anyway. This is not what I came here for. Is not a thing I am ever going to give you. The thing I am giving you is the only thing I am ever going to be willing to give you. You can take it or you cannot take it. I would suggest you take it. The school is small. The students are small. They are very kind. Their teachers are very kind. The food is very good. My mother-in-law has agreed to host you for the first 3 nights. She is the woman who became my mother 11 years ago, when you stopped being mine. She has agreed to be kind to you, in spite of everything she knows. I do not know if you deserve her kindness. I am offering it to you anyway because she is offering it. Take the ticket, or do not take the ticket. Either way, this is what I am giving you. There will not be another offer." My mother stood in my front hallway for almost 5 more minutes. She was looking at the ticket. She was looking at the folder of receipts she was still holding in her other hand. She was, I think, doing math in her head about the cost of acceptance versus the cost of refusal. She said, "Will your father be welcome too?" I said, "If he wants to come, the ticket can be exchanged for 2 seats in economy. I have already worked out the math. Wajuma Kaleo, the headmistress at the school, has confirmed they would welcome you both. My mother-in-law has confirmed she would host you both for 3 nights instead of one of you for 3 nights. The decision is yours." She nodded. She put the ticket in her folder. The folder of receipts and the ticket sat next to each other in her hand for a moment, in a way that almost made me laugh again. She said, "I will think about it." She left. I closed the door behind her. I went into the living room. Yusuf was on the couch with both kids. He looked up at me. He did not ask. He had been listening from the other room. He could hear most of what had happened. I told him I would tell him the rest later. I sat down next to him. Idris reached for me. I picked Idris up. We did not talk about my mother for the rest of that morning. I want to tell you what happened in the 3 weeks that followed, because the weeks are the part of the story I am still living inside. My mother called me 8 days after the visit. She told me she and my father were going to use the ticket. She said it in the voice of a woman who had been talked out of one decision by another decision. I did not ask which one had won. I had told her the offer was the offer. I had not been planning to negotiate. My parents flew to Dar es Salaam in the first week of September. They stayed with Zawadi, my mother-in-law, for 3 nights. Then they stayed at a small hotel in Dar es Salaam for 2 nights. Then they took the small bus, with Zawadi accompanying them, to the town outside the city where Babu Hamis had lived. They visited the primary school. They met Mwajuma Kaleo. They met the 16 children in the first cohort. My mother sent me a photograph from the school on the second day of her visit. The photograph was of her, standing next to a small girl named Subira, who was 11 years old, who had been one of the first students admitted to the scholarship program, and whose own grandmother had died the previous year. Subira was holding a small folder of her schoolwork. My mother had her hand on Subira's shoulder. My mother was not looking at the camera. She was looking at the folder. Her face had an expression on it I had not seen on her face since I was a small girl. I had not been able to name the expression for a long time after she had sent the photograph. I think now that the expression was attention. My mother had been paying attention to a person without performing for her. My parents came back from Tanzania 10 days later. They flew to Toronto on their way back to Boston. They had asked, through Zawadi, if they could see Amani and Idris. I had said yes. They had come to my house for 2 hours. It was not a dramatic visit. There was not a long apology speech. There were not tears. There was a small woman, my mother, sitting on the floor of my living room next to a 3-year-old who had never met her, trying to teach Amani how to do a finger game my mother had taught me when I was 3. Amani had not known the game. Amani had been suspicious of my mother, in the way 3-year-olds are suspicious of people they have not met before. By the end of the visit, Amani had let my mother braid her hair, which is, in my family, the highest compliment a child of 3 can give an adult who is asking for trust. My father had held Idris for almost the whole 2 hours. He had not put him down. He had not said much. He is a quiet man. I had not realized, during the 11 years of estrangement, how much of what had happened in our family had been my mother's voice, and how much my father had been simply going along with what she had said. I have been thinking about that since the visit. I am still thinking about it. We are doing slow work now. There have been 4 more visits. There have been a number of phone calls. My mother and I are figuring out what kind of relationship we are going to have going forward on the other side of 11 years of nothing. I do not know yet. We are not pretending the 11 years did not happen. We are not erasing them. We are also not letting them be the only thing the new relationship is built on. I am taking my time. So is she. I want to tell you what I have learned because I think this is the part that may be useful to you. When somebody in your family decides that a person you love is not allowed to be loved by them, the decision they have made is not actually about the person you love. The decision is about themselves. They are deciding which kind of family they are going to be. They are deciding what kinds of people they are willing to make room for. They are using your love for somebody else as a stage to perform the boundaries of their own narrowness. The performance has very little to do with you. You are an audience, in their version of the story. You happen to be the audience whose attendance they are willing to lose, in order to feel that the boundaries they have drawn are real boundaries. You do not have to attend that performance. You do not have to keep being in the audience. You can leave. You can build a life with the person you love, in a country and a culture and a language they have decided is beneath them, and you can be happy there, and you can let them perform their boundaries to an empty room. The empty room will eventually become uncomfortable for them. They will eventually begin to wonder if the performance was worth it. Some of them will come back. Some of them will not. Whether they come back is not your problem. Your problem is the life you are building. Build it carefully. Build it with the people who never asked you to choose. Those people will become your real family. The other family will either eventually figure out how to join your life on your terms, or they will not. Either way, the life is the win. The life is always the win. If somebody in your family eventually does come back, asking for something they think they have a right to, give them what you can actually give them, which is almost never the thing they came for. The thing they came for is, in most cases, a confirmation of the story they have been telling themselves about you. They want to be made central in your life again, as a way of confirming that they were the ones who made you into the success you have become. They were not. The people who made you into your success were the ones who were there, on Sunday afternoons, learning to cook your mother's biryani so that you would not have to live without it. Those are the people you owe your continued attention to. The other family, when they come back, you can offer them something else. A ticket to a country they were too small to ever visit. A morning in a school that bears the name of a man they would never have met. An afternoon on the floor of your living room with a grandchild they had decided would not be allowed in their family. These are the gifts that actually mean something. These are the gifts that ask them to grow into a kind of person they had decided they were not going to grow into. Most of them, given enough time, will surprise you. They will grow into it. The growth is the thing you have to be patient enough to allow for. I want to ask you something before you go. Tell me in the comments the moment your family told you, in language that left no room for misunderstanding, that the person you loved was not going to be loved by them. Tell me how old you were. Tell me what they said. Tell me what you did. Tell me who became your real family in the years that followed. Tell me whether anybody in the original family has ever come back, and if they did, tell me what you offered them and whether they took it and what you learned from what they took or did not take. There are more of us than the families who tried to draw their narrow boundaries would ever know. We have been finding each other for years, and we have been raising children together, and we have been cooking each other's mother's recipes on Sunday afternoons. Tell me yours. I will be reading every comment. I will see you in the next one.